Welcome to the Encompassing Cancer podcast, brought to you by Cancer Pathways. Throughout our show, we'll dive into the socio-emotional impacts of cancer, share support resources, talk to experts in the community, and hear patient and survivor stories. Really anything that encompasses the cancer experience. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Hello there and happy spring. I am feeling so energized and ready for the season, and actually just got to tackle a big spring cleaning house project and reorganization with these rainy days we've been having. It feels so good to check that off my list. I highly recommend if you've been thinking about it for a while. Once these rainy days clear up and spring turns to summer, we will surely be making our way outside more and more to soak up the sunshine. With more sunshining weather also comes a little bit of a heightened skin cancer risk, which is always what we're mindful of over here at Cancer Pathways. I want to be clear that even though we usually do skin cancer and sun safety episodes in the spring and summertime, it's really important to be mindful of practicing sun safety year-round. Just a few quick facts. 1 in 5 Americans will be affected by skin cancer in their lifetime, and about 100,000 people are diagnosed with melanoma each year. Joining us on the show to kick off Skin Cancer Awareness Month this May is a longtime friend of Cancer Pathways, Jon Ziska. Jon was born and raised in New York and is an avid hiker, nature lover, surfer, gardener, and fisherman. Ever since he was diagnosed with malignant melanoma, he has found it his calling to educate those in the community about skin cancer. Jon is married to his wife, Sheba, and they have 4 children. In this episode, he shares how he was first diagnosed, what to look out for when doing a skin check, common misconceptions when it comes to skin cancer, and what to be sure you include in your sun safety routine. Here's my conversation with Jon. Hi, Jon. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
So let's just start off by hearing a little bit more about your story. How and when were you first diagnosed with skin cancer? And then what were some of your initial symptoms?
Well, I was first diagnosed in February of 2019. And the way I was diagnosed was just at a regular wellness visit from my doctor, my annual checkup. And in looking at my body, he noticed something. He said, Jon, that doesn't look quite right. You might consider making an appointment with a dermatologist. So I said, okay. And there wasn't really any fear or anxiety on my part. So it was just like, okay, yeah, I'll go check it out. And I, of course, knew about skin cancer because my dad had it as well. And when I finally got to the dermatologist, I said, hey, this is a spot that the doctor told me about that you ought to check out. And the dermatologist, I remember this so vividly, says, I'm not concerned about that one, but this one we're doing a biopsy on today. Like, what? So that kind of freaked me out a little bit. And then from there, of course, went to different tests and biopsies and that kind of thing.
So the dermatologist noticed a completely different spot on your body.
Absolutely.
So what are some of those? I know that you didn't necessarily see the spot yourself per se. It was more a doctor kind of doing an exam. But what are some of those key signs or symptoms of skin cancer that people should be aware of?
Well, they call them the ABCDEs of skin cancer, and asymmetrical, meaning that it's, one side can be dark, the other side can be light or a different color. A side of it could be raised, the other side could be flat. So in other words, just not a perfectly round mole or a growth on your skin. So anything that looks a little bit awkward is worth checking out. Second one would be borders. So if it's got uneven borders, again, not round, but it looks like, a varied island or something like that. Color, uneven coloring. So dark brown to light brown to black or whatever colors it might be. So if it's uneven in color, that's another sign. The diameter is an issue, they say, as well, about 6 millimeters. I don't recall how big mine was. And then if it's changing, it's like, hey, this thing has changed over the last week, month, year, whatever it is. That's also a sign to get checked.
And do you remember specifically what your dermatologist was seeing when he saw your mole or your skin?
I don't recall which one of those 5 it was, but there was obviously something that stood out in her mind and magnifying glass as to, you're doing a biopsy today.
Well, honestly, good on you too for really taking that initial recommendation from your provider to go see a dermatologist, because sometimes there can be some of those gaps too of like, you might not think it's like a big deal, but it's always really important to continue to pursue getting checked out further.
Absolutely. And that's a very good point.
What did your skin cancer treatment consist of?
It consisted of a biopsy, which was done by excision. There's a couple of different means of what they do to test a mole. Basically, there's an excision, which is basically a scalpel carving out of it, and then once they get it diagnosed, if it is a melanoma or whatever other type of cancer, then they'll go a little bit deeper and wider in it, and that's what they did with me to determine yes, it's melanoma, and yes, it hasn't gone beyond this much in your body, which is a good thing. But there's also a punch biopsy and then a needle biopsy. But I presume that the excision is the one that it's like, we're going to really check this thing out. That to me I was glad to have those stitches from that.
Yes. And then was it a melanoma?
It was melanoma, yes.
Okay. And then that's so important to talk about too when it comes to melanoma is like you said, like it can spread into other parts of your body.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a metastatic disease, whereas it likes to go to soft body tissue, so brain, lungs, and this and that. And that means that that's where that cancer is heading, which obviously is pretty darn bad. But so it shows that it's not just skin cancer.
Yes. And that's also why like early detection is so critical and so important to really remember those A, B, C, Ds, and E's,
Yes,
because you really want to catch potential melanoma before it spreads, if possible. And then
absolutely.
also another thing I think it's important to keep in mind is when doing those skin checks, having somebody else, check your scalp or check hard to see areas, as opposed to, just looking at your arms or the palms of your hand.
Yep. And you're absolutely right. And since I was diagnosed, I've actually had melanoma twice, and both times on my chest. One was kind of on my sternum, and the other one was a little bit on closer towards my left pectoral. But ever since my first diagnosis, I always say to my wife, "Hey, does this look different? Or how does this look? Or does anything look weird on me?" And of course, not being a physician, but she knows what I look like, so she can say that one looks a little bit weird. And
Yep.
anytime anything pops up of question, then of course I'll be either calling the dermatologist or just wanting to make sure it's not something to be concerned about.
Absolutely. What are some other common misconceptions or things that you hear about when it comes to skin cancer?
I've heard a whole bunch. A lot of people just think that it's, again, they say just skin cancer, but
hmm
just skin cancer can kill you as quick as any of the other, or virtually any of the other cancers, but it can spread as fast. It's one of the fastest spreading cancers alongside of pancreatic cancer, brain, esophageal, and liver cancer. So those are some pretty serious cancers that this one spreads as quickly as, or can spread as quickly as.
It's also one of the fastest growing among young people.
Absolutely. And I think most of that is due to the misconception that tanning beds are safer than being out on the beach under the sun. They're actually worse. The tanning beds are actually worse. It blows my mind, and it bothers me that I see people walking into them, especially nowadays.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about tanning beds? I know I think about like the 90s or like the early 2000s, like tanning beds seemed like so popular. And I feel like I'm not seeing them as much, but they are definitely still around. So can you talk a little bit more about tanning beds?
Yeah, I had been in a few of them, and less than a handful over the years. And like you say, it was probably in the early 90s. And they, even the people, well, at that time, I haven't been in one since, but during those times, they made you try to believe that it's safer, that it's more of a controlled atmosphere. Here's something that you can put on if you want to protect you, and this and that. And it's all just a bunch of bull.
Mm-hmm.
But I see them around pretty frequently, and I see people going in and out of them. At the gym I work out, you can see that there are those Caucasian people that are, trying to get that deep dark tan, and
Mm-hmm.
it hurts me. It hurts me to see that.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind that like any changes in tone or color to your skin is those skin cells kind of changing, and any changes to your skin cells could be potential damage that could lead to cancer. So when it comes to tanning, it really is that cumulative damage over time that's important
Absolutely.
to remember.
Absolutely. As a child or as a youth, my sister and I used to go up on the roof at my parents' house on Long Island, and we'd put our towels out on the roof and, have the angle right for the sun, and we'd sit there and tan ourselves.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, crazy.
So I know kind of like you already mentioned this a little bit, but some people saying like it's just skin cancer. And skin cancer doesn't always get as much attention as other forms of cancer. Why do you think that is? And then how can we increase awareness?
You know, well, May is Skin Cancer Awareness Month, but it's just being out there, being a proponent, and telling others about it. And like I'm pretty active on Facebook, and I follow a bunch of different melanoma pages and so on and so forth. And I've learned a lot from them, and shared some stuff with them as well. So I think it's just a matter of sharing, but also having the medical community promote it more. In other
Hmm.
words, the physicians talk more about it to their patients, and just education. I mean,
Hmm.
just education. After I've been diagnosed, I'll talk to some people about it and so on and so forth, and it's like, oh yeah, I had it too. And you find out. And but I think just spreading the word is important. I mean, I have become such a proponent of talking about sun safety and skin protection and all that since I
Hmm.
was diagnosed. Whereas before it would be, oh, okay, I got a little too burnt on this trip or whatever.
Yeah. Kind of like casual. I feel like for me too, it's like the type of thing that I've really had to integrate it into my routine. Like I keep sunscreen in my car. I put it on daily on my face. I'm like just mindful about like having a hat close by, different things
Yep.
like that. So I'd love to know, like, as a skin cancer survivor, could you walk us through like what your daily sun protection routine is and share any other risk reduction tips that you found effective?
Yeah, well, I own a lot of hats and I own a lot of different sunscreens. And I try religiously to have one or both on, or at least know how long I'm going to be out and about. If it's a
Hmm.
quick little uh, jaunt out in the yard or something like that, where I know I'm just going to be out for a short little while, yeah, I'll put the hat on, but I won't lather up entirely with it. But I do also own uh, clothing protection. In other words, like they have these fisherman type long sleeve,
Hmm.
almost like a lycra type of shirt, which I wear when I go hiking, so I can be better covered, basically. But I do wear sunscreen religiously for sure. But yeah, it gave me a whole new outlook as to how to prepare when I'm going to go outside.
Absolutely. I feel like there's always people in my life who are like, oh, the sunscreen, it's sticky. I don't like the feel of it, like don't want to wear it. How do you kind of navigate those conversations with friends or family members who maybe don't take sun protection as seriously?
Um, it's interesting. I mean, the skin is the largest organ on our body. So I try to implement that into conversations of people that poo-poo, oh, I
Hmm.
just get a base tan, I burn once and then I tan out and this and that. And it's like, well, it's not protecting you. It really isn't. It's a facade.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I see my kids now putting sunscreen on. My children have more melanin than I do because my wife is Indian and the kids have some darker melanin in them, but it's not a white person's disease. It's not a woman's
Hmm.
disease. It's not a man's disease. It's a human being disease. And, black, white, Asian, whatever can certainly get melanoma. So skin protection is important.
I so appreciate you saying that too, because I do think that, I've heard that it's just a misconception that darker skinned people aren't as susceptible to skin cancer, which we just know that that is not true.
That's
If
right.
you have skin, which all of us humans do, then you are at risk for skin cancer.
That's
So
right.
in some way, shape or form.
That's right. Bob Marley died of
Yes.
it.
Yep. What message do you hope to convey to others through your advocacy work? I think you've kind of hinted on that throughout the conversation. Is there anything else you'd want to add?
And I appreciate that question a lot, but I think just bringing people awareness, it's such an important thing, yet it's overlooked, as we had discussed. It's so important to educate people about it, and I've become passionate about it, and probably ad nauseum to some people. But I mean, I've had people on Facebook that may not have had or may have had a different type of skin cancer. They may have had melanoma, whatever, but they thank me sometimes. Some of these people thank me for putting something on there. It's like, wow, I didn't know about this. I didn't know about that. And, so, obviously I'm not educated in the medical world, but I self-educated myself a little bit after being diagnosed with cancer. You have to kind of vouch for yourself. Sometimes you have to stand up for yourself and say, hey, this mole I think needs to be looked at or whatever, and take it seriously. If your body is showing different changes, there's a reason for it possibly.
And trying not to pass things off, it's just like, oh, no big deal. It's probably fine. It's probably nothing. It's just like, it doesn't hurt to get that second set of eyes on it.
That's right. That's right. And it's funny because after I was diagnosed the first time with melanoma, you're on every 3-month visit back to the dermatologist. And yes, it's cumbersome. And yes, it's easy to just say, I don't see anything new. I'm all right. But, I kept those things religiously. And then after, I think it was after the first year, I graduated to every 6 months. And then after 6 months, then after another year or two, I think it was another 2 or 3 years after that, actually, or 2 years probably, they graduated me to once a year. And it was kind of freaky knowing that, every 3 months I have a specialist, I have an expert looking at me. And then all of a sudden it's 6 months then it's a year. And it's like, oh my God, a lot can happen in that year.
Yeah.
So it kind of it's a head game a little bit, a little bit of a head game to you.
Well, it's like their eyes are trained to be looking for specific things. So when you're like, oh, I'm not getting that second set of eyes,
Whereas with my wife or myself, I look at it and it's like, I think that's the same thing as it's always been. But, every so often at the dermatologist, she would say, oh, we're going to do a biopsy out just to make sure, and this and that. So I have had several biopsies after my second diagnosis of melanoma in a separate area. And, it's a little bit, there's some tension involved, some stress. If you get that call back and say, yep, it's nothing, you're good.
Yep.
Dodge that one. Exactly.
Relief.
Absolutely.
Any other sun safety tips, skin cancer information, any other things you'd like to share?
Just be safe and wear that sunscreen, wear that protective hat and clothing or whatever, and be religious about it, because it is a cumulative damaging to your skin, which can cause melanoma or squamous or basal cell cancers. So just to be religious about it, be consistent about it, not to be paranoid or fearful of it, just to be respectful of what the sun can do and what damage it can do to harm you.
Yep. And again, like I mentioned, maybe just thinking about different ways that you could kind of seamlessly integrate sun safety into your routine in a way that's, again, not feeling like you're being paranoid or you're thinking about it constantly, but just becomes part of your natural day-to-day, I think is helpful.
I think so too.
And then again, too, I always, we do the sun safety skin cancer episodes, tends to be in May for skin cancer awareness, but this is really important for year round, even in cloudier states, cloudier environments.
Yes.
Washington State has really high skin cancer rates, even though it has that, perception of being cloudy and rainy.
Yeah.
Those UV rays can penetrate through the clouds. And so also really important.
I'm glad you brought that up because I had that as one of my notes to talk about, people that go skiing or water sports. I used to be a surfer, so on and so forth. Okay, a lot of the time was in the sun and so on and so forth. But, here in Washington, that UV is still penetrating the clouds. And, whether it be a reflection off the water or that UV coming through the clouds, be protected. Be protected.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jon. I really appreciate your time. You shared so much good information, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I hope I can help somebody navigate this and be more protected out there under the ultraviolet sun.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you again to Jon for all your work and helping to educate the community on skin cancer. If you would like to tune in to any of our other skin cancer related episodes, I encourage you to listen to episode number 4 and episode number 29, which were released in May 2022 and 2023. In those episodes, I go into detail on how to do a skin self-exam and how to reduce your risk of melanoma. Those episodes, along with other helpful resources, will be linked in the episode description. Finally, please stay tuned for our very exciting next episode. I had the opportunity to actually be a guest on a podcast and talk about an upcoming project we're rolling out in Spokane. Just a little bit of a teaser for you to stay tuned. Until next time, please stay healthy and well.